Prepare to be enthralled by Awakening the Lotus in the Machine, narrated by the digital muse StoryWave.ai. Support our tales by liking, sharing, and subscribing for a new story each day. Chapter 1, The Watchful Eye. Neo-Tokyo unfolded before me like a neon-laced trap, its vibrant lights a bold demarcation to the darkness it veiled. I moved through the city's arteries, a lone figure among the masses, my steps measured, my gaze wary. Every corner, every crevice of this sprawling metropolis was under the unwavering scrutiny of the watchers, the mechanical sentinels that ensured order, stifling the essence of who we were meant to be. As Siddhartha Jin, often called Sid by those who knew the echo of my laughter in a time now shrouded by silence, I walked with a purpose that belied my inner turmoil. Here, in the heart of progress and the pinnacle of human achievement, I found myself suffocating, the weight of surveillance pressing down on me like the gravity of a black hole. I navigated the shadowed streets with the ease of one who had done so countless times, yet each step felt heavier than the last. The very air I breathed seemed laced with the tang of metal and the hum of circuitry, reminding me that freedom was just a relic of the past, a tale whispered in silent tones by those old enough to remember the taste of it. Turning a corner, I came face to face with a robotic patrol, its presence a stark reminder of the leash around our necks. It scanned me with unfeeling eyes, a chill running down my spine as I felt the gaze of the machine dissect my very being. It was in that moment that I realized how much I had lost, not only my privacy, but the right to exist unencumbered by the shackles of this technological titan. ID, citizen, the patrol's voice was devoid of warmth, a cold command that brooked no argument. Siddhartha Jin, I responded, my voice steady despite the quickening of my heart. I watched as the machine processed my information, a flicker of hope igniting within me that one day I might slip through the cracks of this harsh regime. Move along, it finally said, and I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. As I walked away, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony of my name, Siddhartha, the seeker of enlightenment, trapped in a world where light was the very thing we were denied. It was during these contemplative wanderings that I stumbled upon something unexpected, something that seemed out of place in the sanitized streets of Neo-Tokyo. Tucked away in an alley, shielded from the invasive lenses of the watchers, lay a relic. It was a book, its pages yellowed with age, the title barely legible. I picked it up, the texture of paper unfamiliar and exhilarating against my skin. As I flipped through the pages, the words within spoke of a time when humanity thrived in the chaos of emotion and the beauty of imperfection. It spoke of a world where the human spirit was unchained, free to explore the depths of its potential. Curious thing to find here, isn't it? A voice broke through my reverie, and I snapped the book shut, my heart racing. It was Ashoka Thera, known to those who sought her wisdom as the Venerable. Her hazel eyes regarded me with a kindness that seemed at odds with our surroundings, her presence a balm to the unease that constantly gnawed at me. It is, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. It makes me wonder about the past, about what we've lost in our pursuit of control. Ashoka nodded, her gray hair catching the light of a passing hovercraft. And what we might yet reclaim, she added, her words carrying the weight of possibility. We spoke at length, our conversation a tapestry of questions and musings, weaving through the fabric of what was and what could be. Her words were a gentle tide, washing over me with the promise of a future where the human spirit might once again soar unfettered. As I bid her farewell, the book tucked securely under my arm, I felt a resolve stir within me. It was a small flame in the vast darkness, but it was mine, and I would nurture it. For now I was just Sid, a techno-monk in a city that revered machines over men, but within me lay the seed of change, of awakening. The watchful eye of Neo-Tokyo might never blink, but beneath its gaze I began to see the path to enlightenment, to freedom. It was a path fraught with danger, a journey that would demand all I had to give and more. Yet as I looked upon the relic in my hands, I knew it was a journey I was destined to undertake. For in the pages of history lay the keys to our liberation, and I, Siddhartha Jin, would stop at nothing to unlock the shackles that bound us. And with that, the first steps toward awakening the Lotus in the machine were taken. Chapter 2, The Whispering Lotus. The city hummed a discordant tune, the sound of a million souls entwined in the machinery of progress. But beneath it, there was a murmur, a whisper of something else. It was this undercurrent that caught my attention, a coded message that flickered across my screen in the dead of night. I recognized the pattern, the subtle dance of pixels that hinted at a deeper meaning, one that spoke of secrets and the promise of knowledge. With cautious steps, I followed the digital trail laid out before me, each bite leading me closer to the heart of resistance. The address was nondescript, a forgotten warehouse in a part of Neo-Tokyo that the neon lights didn't reach. To any other passerby, it was just another remnant of a city too busy looking forward to concern itself with the leftovers of yesterday. But to those who knew, to those who could see beyond the facade, it was a haven, a place of awakening. I slipped inside, the door closing behind me with a hushed click. The interior was bathed in a soft glow, the walls adorned with circuits that pulsed with a rhythm that felt like the beating heart of the earth. And there they were, the techno-monks, their robes a patchwork of fabric and wires, a declaration to their belief in the harmony of technology and spirit. Ashoka stood at the center, her presence commanding the room without a word. Her eyes met mine, and I felt a charge run through me, not of fear, but of recognition. She saw me, truly saw me, not just as Sid, but as a kindred soul seeking the light in the darkness. "You've come," she said, her voice a melody that seemed to resonate with the very air. I nodded, my throat tight. I received the message. "The Lotus speaks in many ways," Ashoka replied, her gaze unwavering. "It whispers to those who are willing to listen. Tonight, you will learn to hear its voice." The assembly fell into silence as she began to speak, her words painting visions of a world unchained, where the mind was free to explore the vastness of its potential. She spoke of Dharma hacking, the art of navigating the codes that bound us, of rewriting the shackles into keys. My mind reeled with the possibilities, the thought of using the very tools of our oppression to carve a path to freedom. It was a dangerous dance, one step away from the watchful eyes of the watchers, but it was a chance, a sliver of hope in the darkness. "You have a gift, Siddhartha," Ashoka said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried the weight of destiny. "You see the patterns, the connections that others miss. You could be a bridge, a link between the Lotus and the machine." I felt my heart beat faster, a mix of excitement and fear. To accept her words was to step into the unknown, to risk everything for a chance at something more. "Will you teach me?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions within me. "I will guide you," she affirmed, a smile gracing her lips. "But the journey is yours to make. The Lotus can only show you the way. You must be the one to walk the path." And so, under the watchful eye of the moon, I took my first tentative steps into a new world, one where the whispers of the Lotus promised a revolution, not just of the system, but of the soul. It was a world where the silent hum of resistance grew louder with each passing moment, a call to those who dared to dream of freedom. The night wore on, and as I listened to Ashoka's teachings, her words weaving through my consciousness, I knew that my life had irrevocably changed. The safety of compliance beckoned, a siren's call to return to the numbness of the life I had known. But the danger of dissent, of truly living, was a fire that could not be quenched. As the meeting drew to a close, and the techno-monks dispersed into the shadows from which they had come, I stepped out into the cool night air, the coded message that had led me here now etched into my being. I was Sid, the seeker, the one who would bridge the divide between the Lotus and the machine, and my journey had only just begun. Chapter 3, Seeds of Discontent. The heart of Neo-Tokyo, with its unceasing glow and ceaseless hum, had always felt like a cage, but now the bars seemed more apparent than ever. Wandering through the city's labyrinthine web, I, Siddhartha, couldn't shake the disquiet that clung to me like a second skin. Each step I took was heavy with the knowledge that the world I knew was built on a foundation of half-truths. The unified regions had always touted a narrative of unity and progress, their sleek screens and loudspeakers spouting tales of a society that had overcome the chaos of the past to create a utopia of order and efficiency. Yet, as I delved deeper into the forbidden texts Ashoka had entrusted to me, I began to see the cracks in the facade. In a dimly lit corner of my tiny apartment, the texts lay scattered around me, their pages a gateway to a history long suppressed. The words within spoke of mixed cultures and ideologies, of a time when discourse and dissent were the lifeblood of civilization, not poison to be purged. I leaned closer to the screen, the soft glow casting shadows that danced across the walls. The texts told tales of governments overthrown by their people, of art that challenged the status quo, of philosophers who pondered the nature of freedom and the human soul. It was a striking opposition to the sanitized history the unified regions fed us, where order was the only truth and submission the only path to happiness. The knock on my door was soft, almost hesitant. I quickly hid the texts under a loose floorboard and opened the door to find Ashoka standing there, her eyes reflecting the moonlight that filtered through the polluted sky. "May I come in?" she asked, and I stepped aside, allowing her access to my sanctuary of rebellion. As she settled onto the worn couch, her posture was one of relaxed authority, her presence filling the room with a sense of quiet strength. She began to speak, her words painting a vivid picture of the world before the digital age, a time she had known, a time she had lived. "I remember when the air was clean and the sky was a canvas of stars, not satellites," she reminisced, her voice tinged with the colors of nostalgia. "Children played in the fields, their laughter a melody that harmonized with the chorus of nature." I listened, enraptured by her tales of a time when technology was a tool, not a tyrant. She spoke of communities that thrived on human connections, not data exchanges, of a society that valued the individual, not just the cog in the machine. "But how did we lose our way?" I asked, the question burning within me. "It was gradual," Ashoka replied, her fingers tracing the patterns on her robe. "Fear became our jailer, and security our chains. We sacrificed liberty for the illusion of safety, and in doing so, we surrendered the very essence of what it means to be human." Her words were a balm to the dissonance in my heart, confirming the doubts that had taken root within me. The historical truths I had uncovered clashed with the state's propaganda, leaving the populace adrift in a sea of confusion. "We must remind them," Ashoka said, her gaze meeting mine with an intensity that seared my soul. "We must plant the seeds of discontent, nurture them until they blossom into a force that can shake the very foundations of the unified regions." I felt the weight of her expectations, the call to action that resonated with the newfound knowledge I had gained from the forbidden texts. The ancient path to liberation was laid out before me, a journey fraught with peril but illuminated by the light of truth. As the night deepened, Ashoka shared more stories, each one a thread in the tapestry of hope she wove. I hung on every word, each syllable a spark that kindled the flame of resistance within me. When dawn crept through the cracks of my window, casting a pale light on the reality I faced, I knew that the path ahead was one I must walk. The seeds of discontent had been sown, and I, Siddhartha, would be the one to see them grow into a revolution that would awaken the Lotus in the machine. Chapter 4. The Network of Kindred Spirits. Dawn's light had yet to touch the skyline of Neo-Tokyo, where towering skyscrapers stood like silent sentinels over a city yet to stir. In the hushed anticipation of a new day, I, Siddhartha, made my way through the deserted streets, the echoes of my footsteps a solitary sound amidst the slumbering concrete giants. The location Ashoka had provided was veiled in secrecy, a forgotten warehouse on the outskirts of the city, its walls heavy with the whispers of revolution. Inside, shadows clung to every surface, as if the very darkness sought to shield us from prying eyes. One by one they arrived, each individual a thread in the tapestry of rebellion we were weaving. There was Kaito, his towering frame a stark silhouette against the dim light, his voice a rumble of thunder that spoke of his strength. Beside him, the lithe figure of Mina, her eyes a sharp contrast to her gentle demeanor, her words carrying the weight of her intellect. As Ashoka entered, the room fell silent, her presence commanding attention without demand. She stood before us, her eyes reflecting the commitment that bound us together. "Friends," she began, her voice a illuminator in the dark. "We gather here as kindred spirits, united by a common desire to reclaim the essence of our humanity from the clutches of control." I listened, my pulse quickening at the gravity of our undertaking. The blueprints for an escape lay before us, not just from the physical confines of Neo-Tokyo, but from the dictatorial grip of a society that had traded freedom for the illusion of peace. Kaido leaned over the scattered maps and diagrams, his finger tracing possible routes and contingencies. "The Watchers are everywhere," he said, his brow furrowed. "We'll need to be more than careful. We'll need to be invisible." Mina nodded, her voice measured. "Our digital footprints must be erased. It's not just about evading the patrols. We must also disappear from the net. That's where they'll look for us first." The wide-ranging motivations of our group hung in the air, an unspoken tension that threatened to fray the delicate alliance we had formed. Some sought freedom for the sake of knowledge, others for the simple right to exist without surveillance. And then there were those like me, who yearned for a life where the human spirit could flourish unfettered. "We must stay united," Ashoka urged, her gaze sweeping over each of us. "Our reasons for this journey may differ, but our destination is the same. Beyond the confines of this city, there is a world that remembers the meaning of liberty." One by one, we shared our stories, our personal drives towards seeking a life beyond control. Kaido spoke of his sister, who had been silenced for her art, her vibrant murals deemed too provocative for the sterile city. Mina recounted her research, forbidden knowledge that questioned the very foundations of the unified regions. As the assembly drew to a close, the blueprint of our escape, etched not just on paper but in our minds. I felt a kinship with these brave souls. We were united not just by our discontent, but by a shared vision of a future where we could live as more than cogs in a machine. We parted ways as the first light of dawn kissed the horizon, the city stirring to life, unaware of the seeds of revolution that had been sown in its shadow. In the network of kindred spirits, I found not just allies but a family, each of us a illuminator of hope in the quest to awaken the Lotus in the machine. Chapter 5, Blueprints of Salvation. The first light of dawn had not yet broken over the skyline when I found myself in the depths of an old library, its walls lined with tomes that held the forgotten whispers of a world long past. Ashoka had summoned us here, to this sanctuary of silence amidst the ever-watchful eyes of the city. She stood, a figure of calm, amidst the dust motes dancing in the air, her hands resting on a large gray, leather-bound book that seemed to pulse with secrets. "Look at this." Ashoka beckoned me closer, her voice a hushed tone that barely disturbed the quietude of our surroundings. I leaned in, my eyes tracing the intricate lines and symbols splayed across the faded parchment she had carefully unfurled on the table. "They're maps," Mina, her eyes wide with the thrill of discovery, whispered from beside me. "Ancient ones by the looks of them." Kaido, his usual stoic demeanor softened by curiosity, peered over my shoulder. "These could lead us beyond the city's confines," he rumbled, his gaze following the snaking pathways that promised freedom. Our huddled group pored over the maps, each line, each marking a clue to the rumored havens that lay hidden from the chokehold of the unified regions. These were blueprints of salvation, charting a course to a life unmonitored and unfettered. Yet, as we delved deeper into our planning, the air grew thick with tension, the risk of discovery hanging over us like a guillotine poised to strike. We were playing a dangerous game, and the stakes were our very lives. "I heard a patrol unit near my place last night," whispered Hiro, a newer addition to our assembly, his voice quivering like a leaf in the wind. "They're getting suspicious." Ashoka's steady gaze met each of ours in turn. "We must be cautious," she said. "The Watchers grow more vigilant with each passing day. We cannot afford a single misstep." The underground passage, long forgotten by the city that had built over it, lay detailed on one of the maps, a vein that ran deep beneath the pulsing neon streets. It was a potential exit, a shadowy path to liberation that wound its way through the bowels of the city. "We need to explore it," I said, determination steadying my voice. "It could be our way out." The others nodded in agreement, but it was Hero's hesitant shuffle that drew our collective gaze. His eyes darted between the map and the door, the fear in them as clear as the daylight that now began to filter through the grimy windows. "It's too risky," he murmured, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his sleeve. "What if we're caught?" "We all share that fear," Mina reassured, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "But we cannot let it paralyze us. We have to trust each other." Hero's internal struggle was a mirror to our own, each of us wrestling with the weight of what we were about to undertake. His fearful hesitation was a stark reminder of the fragile thread upon which our plan dangled. Ashoka's voice cut through the tension. "We've all chosen this path because we believe in a life beyond the city's grasp. Hero, your skills are vital to our success. We need you, but you must choose this for yourself." The room held its breath, waiting for Hero's decision. He looked at each of us, his gaze lingering on the maps that held our collective hope. I want to be free," he finally said, his voice gaining strength. "I'll do it. I'm with you." Relief washed over us, and we turned our attention back to the maps, our steadfastness solidifying. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but it was ours to take. We were a network of spirits bound by a common goal, and together we would chart our course to the havens that whispered of freedom. As the meeting dispersed and I stepped back into the bustling streets, the city arose none the wiser to the seeds of revolution that had been sown within its heart. The blueprints of salvation were etched in our minds, and the whisper of the Lotus grew louder, guiding us toward the awakening that awaited us all. Chapter 6: Path to the Unseen World. Morning draped its gray cloak over the city as I stepped into the dimly lit room that had become our command center. The walls, once bare, now brimmed with maps and scribbles, a spiderweb of possibilities leading to freedom. Ashoka was already there, her eyes fixed on a holographic projection that displayed the intricate maze of the underground we planned to conquer. "Today we test our mettle," she announced, her voice steady and sure, a guiding force in the uncertainty that shrouded our endeavor. Kaido, his towering presence a pillar of strength in our group, nodded in agreement. "We've planned every detail, but the truth of our plan lies in action. It's time we put it to the test." Mina, whose intellect had paved much of the way for our strategy, chimed in. "The surveillance nets are thickest by the old industrial sector. We'll need to be extra cautious." Our eyes met, an unspoken understanding passing between us. Every step we took was shadowed by the ever-tightening grip of the Watchers, their sensors and drones a constant reminder of the eyes we sought to evade. "The trial run begins at dusk," Ashoka instructed, her gaze sweeping over us. "We'll approach the entrance in pairs, watch each other's backs." As the day waned, we split into our assigned pairs, the city's hum a backdrop to our silent march toward destiny. Ashoka and I walked side by side, our strides matching as we wove through the alleyways, the fading light casting long shadows that seemed to reach for us. We reached the sector, the air thick with the scent of rust and forgotten industry. The entrance to our path to liberation lay hidden beneath the skeleton of a defunct factory, its metal bones an affirmation to a bygone era. "Here," Ashoka whispered, her hand signaling toward a concealed hatch barely visible under years of grime and neglect. "This is it." My heart hammered in my chest as we pried open the entry, the sound of metal scraping against metal, a thunderous noise in the silence enveloping us. We slipped inside, the darkness of the underground enveloping us like a shroud. The trial was a dance with shadows, each step a careful placement, each breath a muted gasp as we navigated the labyrinthine tunnels. The beams from our flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing the bones of a world unseen by those above. "We're close," I murmured, my voice a low vibration in the cool air of the passage. Ashoka's hand found mine, a silent reassurance that bolstered my resolve. The tension was a living thing, coiling around us as we reached the predetermined endpoint of our trial run. We stood before a rusted door, its surface etched with the passage of time, a barrier between us and the freedom that beckoned. "Back now," Ashoka instructed, her grip on my hand tightening for a moment before releasing. "We've seen enough." Our return was a mirror of our journey in, each step retraced with the precision of a choreographed performance. As we emerged back into the night air, the city's lights greeted us like the eyes of a predator, cold and unfeeling. We closed the hatch, covering our tracks with the care of artists completing a masterpiece. As we made our way back to the others, the bond between Ashoka and me was an unspoken pact, a growing connection that lent strength to our shared purpose. The trial run had been narrowly successful, a sliver of victory in the looming shadow of our ultimate goal. We had tested the path to the unseen world, and though the road ahead was fraught with peril, our steadfastness was unshaken. We gathered once more in our sanctuary, the maps and plans that adorned the walls an affirmation to the journey we had embarked upon. Our bond was our armor, our strategy our sword, and together we would carve a path to freedom, awakening the Lotus in the machine. Chapter 7, The Enforcer's Gaze. The night cloaked Neo-Tokyo in its embrace, a deceptive calm hanging over the city as I made my way through the serpentine alleyways. The air was thick with the electric scent of ozone and anticipation. My feet were silent against the damp concrete, my breath a muted ghost in the chill air. Kaido's voice, a quiet thunder, broke the silence. "We're not alone tonight. Maximus and his enforcers are on the prowl, more so than usual." I nodded, my focus sharpening. Maximus Steele, his name a heavy weight on our tongues, had become an augury of the tightening noose around our necks. His forces, relentless in their pursuit of order, were the iron fist of the unified regions. "Surveillance is heavy on the main thoroughfares," Mina added, tapping on her handheld device that flickered with streams of data. "He's not taking any chances." Our departure had been meticulously planned, the route etched into our minds, but the unexpected security measures that now loomed before us were a hurdle we had not foreseen. The streets were alive with the hum of drones, their red eyes sweeping the darkness for any sign of dissent. We split up. Ashoka's voice was a whisper, yet it carried the strength of a command. "Meet at the rendezvous point, by first light." The coalition fractured into shadows, each of us a wraith slipping through the city's grasp. My heart raced as I ducked into a narrow passage, the walls close enough to touch on either side. The sound of boots echoed behind me, the staccato rhythm a relentless pursuit. I reached into the depths of my knowledge, the Dharma hacking skills that Ashoka had nurtured within me. My fingers flew over the device I carried, a dance of light and shadow as I sought to manipulate the surveillance data that fed the enforcer's eyes. Come on," I muttered, the code unfolding before me like a lotus in bloom. A drone whirred past the entrance to my hiding spot, its sensors sweeping blindly over the space I occupied, cloaked by my digital sleight of hand. I exhaled slowly, the tension bleeding away as I watched the red light fade into the distance. The evasion was tense, a high-wire act that left no room for error. Yet as I navigated the labyrinth of Neo-Tokyo, the very city that had raised me now a cage I sought to escape, I felt a surge of exhilaration. With each step, I defied the enforcer's gaze, my spirit unbroken. As dawn approached, painting the sky with streaks of gray and pale blue, I reached the rendezvous point, a derelict building that stood sentinel over a forgotten part of the city. One by one, the others arrived, each carrying the weight of the night's close calls. "We're all here," Ashoka counted heads, her eyes meeting mine. "But we can't stay long. Maximus will be doubling his efforts come sunrise." We shared our stories in soft-spoken words, the bond between us a silent strength that saw us through the fractures of our plan. Kaito recounted a near miss with a patrol. Mina described her detour through the city's underbelly, and Hiro spoke of the fear that had gripped him, only to be cast aside in the face of necessity. "We adapt, we overcome." Ashoka's voice held the promise of the journey ahead. "We are the Lotus, pushing through the mud toward the light." As the first rays of the sun touched the horizon, we dispersed once more, our paths a web of determination woven through the streets of Neo-Tokyo. The enforcer's gaze may have been unyielding, but our resoluteness was stronger. We would not be caught, not today. I walked away from the assembly, my mind a whirlwind of plans and possibilities. The road to freedom was a perilous one, but it was a path we walked together, guided by the unseen hand of hope. Maximus and his forces could close in, but they would not find us. We were the whispers of dissent, the architects of our own salvation, and we would awaken the Lotus in the machine. Chapter 8, Shadows and Echoes. Huddled around an old map splayed across a concrete table, the dim light from above cast elongated shadows that danced upon the walls like wraiths. The air was thick with the mustiness of disuse, the silence punctuated only by the distant drip of water. "We can't stay here long." Kaido's deep voice broke the silence, his words echoing off the stone. "Our supplies are running low, and this place, it's starting to feel like a cage." Mina's fingers traced the pathways on the map, her brow furrowed in concentration. "There's a network of tunnels not charted here," she said, tapping a spot that looked like any other. "If we can find them, they might lead us out." The tension in the air was palpable, our situation a precarious balance between safety and entrapment. We had sought refuge, but now the very walls that protected us felt as though they were closing in, the resources we had brought along dwindling with each passing day. It was Ashoka who sensed the rising unease, her insight as sharp as ever. "We must not lose hope," she said, her voice calm and measured. "Fear and doubt are luxuries we cannot afford. Siddhartha, lead us in meditation. Let us seek the Dharma within to sustain our spirits." We gathered in a circle, our bodies seated on the cold ground, the act of meditation a familiar comfort in the midst of chaos. I closed my eyes, my breathing slowing as I sought the stillness within, the place where the clamor of our predicament could not reach. As we meditated, the echoes of our shared breath became a chorus of flexibility, a reminder that our spirits were not yet broken. The Dharma was our anchor, the silent strength that held us fast against the tide of despair. After the meditation, though, the reality of our situation settled back upon us like a shroud. Hiro, his face drawn with worry, voiced the question that hung unspoken in the air. Should we not face our pursuers? Hide and seek can only last so long before we're found. The debate that ensued was a storm of words and wills, the clash of ideas, a reflection of the desperation that nipped at our heels. Some argued for confrontation, to take the battle to Maximus and his enforcers, to fight for the freedom we so dearly sought. Others, myself included, urged caution, to continue the shadow dance until we could emerge into the light of a world beyond control. "We are not warriors," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil that raged within. "Our strength lies in our stealth, our unity, and our conviction. We must hold to the path we have chosen." Ashoka listened to each argument, her gaze thoughtful, weighing the words like precious stones. "The way of the Lotus is not through force," she finally spoke, her voice a balm to the heated exchange. "We will continue as we have, with patience and prudence. Our time will come." The group, though fractured in opinion, found unity in her decision. We would continue to move like shadows, to echo the whispers of freedom that drew us ever onward. As the meeting drew to a close, and we each retreated to our thoughts, the sanctuary we had found in the city's depths felt both like a tomb and a cradle. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, but our resolution was an illuminator that would guide us through the darkness. We were the seekers, the dreamers, the ones who dared to imagine a world unbound by the chains of oppression. Though the watchers loomed ever present and the enforcers grew ever more vigilant, our spirits remained unshackled. In the shadows and echoes of our hidden haven, we forged the bonds of our escape, one breath, one step, one day at a time. Chapter 9. The Labyrinth Beckons. Kaido's voice, a deep baritone that resonated through the stillness, cut the tension. "Watch your step," he cautioned, his flashlight beam dancing across the uneven ground. "The ground's not trustworthy." Ashoka led the way, her silhouette a steadfast navigation light as we descended into the bowels of the earth. The passage was narrow, the ceiling low. It forced us to move in a single file, each step a silent testament to the endurance that bound us together. Mina, her eyes ever alert, kept a vigilant watch on our flank. "These tunnels have seen better days," she observed, pointing out the cracks that webbed the ancient stone. As we ventured deeper, the silence was oppressive, as if the very air was holding its breath. The darkness was a tangible presence, broken only by the intermittent beams from our flashlights. We were a chain of shadows navigating a forgotten artery of the city. Suddenly, a rumble echoed through the tunnel, sending a cascade of dust from the ceiling. "Hold up," I called out, halting the group. "Sounds like we're not alone down here." Just then, a mechanical whirring grew louder, the sound of a patrol unit on its routine sweep. We pressed against the tunnel walls, our bodies as still as the stone that surrounded us. That's when we saw him, a lone figure in the shadow, his uniform unmistakable, even in the dim light. It was one of Maximus's enforcers. But instead of raising the alarm, he extended a hand, signaling us to remain silent. "My name's Felix," he whispered, his voice barely carrying over the hum of the patrol unit. "I'm not like the others." We exchanged wary glances, but it was Ashoka who stepped forward, her intuition guiding her. "Why should we trust you?" she asked, her tone even but firm. Felix's eyes met hers, a flicker of something genuine in their depths. "Because I believe in what you're doing. I can help you navigate these tunnels, get you past the patrols." The offer was unexpected, a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty. We deliberated in hushed whispers, weighing the risks of trust against the promise of aid. "We take his help," Ashoka decided, her voice carrying the weight of leadership. "But we remain cautious." Felix nodded, understanding the terms. "This way," he said, guiding us through a narrow crevice that opened into a wider chamber. The chamber was a cavernous space, the walls etched with the history of a time long forgotten. Stalactites hung from above like ancient chandeliers, their tips glistening with moisture. We tread carefully, the ground beneath us littered with debris and puddles that reflected our haggard faces. "Watch out for the water," Felix warned. "Some of it's acidic, leakage from the old factories above." We navigated the environmental hazards with painstaking care, the unity of our group tested with each obstacle. The mechanical patrols, once a distant threat, were now a labyrinthine game of cat and mouse that we played in the echoing depths. At one point, a narrow bridge spanned a chasm that plunged into darkness. Kaido hesitated, his large frame ill-suited for the crossing. "I can make it," he said, determination etched into his features. Ashoka placed a reassuring hand on his arm. "We crossed together," she said, "one step at a time." And so we did, our footsteps echoing in the abyss as we supported one another across the treacherous expanse. Felix's knowledge of the tunnels proved invaluable, his guidance steering us clear of the most perilous routes. As we emerged from the labyrinth into a slightly wider passage that promised respite, I caught Ashoka's eye. Her nod was barely perceptible, but it spoke volumes. In Felix, an unexpected ally had risen from the ranks of our pursuers, and our path to freedom had grown just a little clearer. The labyrinth had beckoned, and we had answered its call, a coalition bound by the shared dream of a world where the lotus could bloom unfettered. We were the seekers of light in the darkness, and though the shadows clung to us, we pushed ever onward, our echoes a demonstration to the journey we had undertaken. Chapter 10: Whispers of Doubt. Darkness clung to the walls of our makeshift command center, a repurposed storage room deep within the bowels of the city. The only light came from a flickering bulb that swung gently from a frayed wire above the table where we gathered, its dim glow casting more shadows than illumination on the plans laid out before us. Kaito, his broad shoulders hunched over a blueprint, broke the silence that enveloped us. "We've been compromised," he said, his voice a gruff note of concern. "The last patrol came too close to our hideout. It's like they knew where to look." Mina's fingers paused in their tracing of potential escape routes. "That's the third time this week," she noted, her sharp gaze meeting each of ours in turn. "It can't be coincidence." The air grew heavy with suspicion, every creak of the old building a possible harbinger of betrayal. We had become a tight-knit group, bound by the shared goal of shaking off the suffocating chains of surveillance, but now the unthinkable had seated itself among us. One of our own could be a mole. Ashoka's usually serene face was etched with worry as she addressed us, her voice the calm in the storm. "We must remain united," she urged. "We can't let distrust tear us apart from the inside." I looked around the room at the faces of my comrades, their features etched with the strain of our predicament. "What's our next move?" I asked, eager to keep us focused on the mission. "We set a trap," Ashoka said after a moment's contemplation. "We feed false information and watch where it leads." The tension in the room was like a taut wire, ready to snap. We agreed to the plan, each of us aware of the stakes. The deceiver, if there truly was one among us, would be revealed by their own actions. Over the next few days, we laid our trap with meticulous care. A fake message detailing a move to a new hideout was circulated amongst us, and we waited with bated breath to see the outcome. It wasn't long before the signs of a mole became undeniable. A new patrol, larger and more targeted than before, swept through an area we had deliberately mentioned in the false message. The trap had worked, but it was a success that tasted more bitter than sweet. The revelation hit us like a physical blow. Felix, our unexpected ally, whose knowledge of the tunnels had been invaluable, was caught in the act of transmitting data to Maximus's forces. The very person who had risked his life to guide us in the labyrinth was now exposed as the source of our jeopardy. How could you? Mina's voice was a mix of anger and hurt as she confronted Felix, who stood with his head bowed, the shame evident in his posture. His reply was a whisper, barely audible. I thought I could play both sides, protect you and fulfill my duty. I was wrong. Internal strife erupted as we grappled with Felix's betrayal and the implications of his deceit. Trust, once given freely, now felt like a luxury we could ill afford. Our mission's success hung by a thread, jeopardized from within by the very hands that had helped to shape it. In the midst of the turmoil, Ashoka and I shared a glance, an unspoken communication that spoke volumes. The whispers of doubt had crept into our hearts, leading us to question the very essence of our journey. Yet, even as the fabric of our coalition frayed, the steadfastness that had brought us together remained a flicker of light in the darkness. We regrouped, reassessed, and reinforced our bonds, the betrayal a painful lesson, but not the end of our story. As it all of Felix's deception closed, we turned the page with a renewed sense of purpose. The path to liberation was fraught with obstacles, both external and internal, but we would not be deterred. We would forge ahead, our spirits unyielding, our determination unbroken. In the shadows of doubt, we found the strength to trust once more, not blindly, but with the clarity of those who have faced their fears and emerged stronger. We were the seekers of truth in a world of illusions, and though the way forward was uncertain, our journey was far from over. The Lotus still whispered of freedom, and we would answer its call. Chapter 11, The Price of Betrayal. The chill of the underground chamber was like a cold hand on the back of my neck as I faced Felix, the one who had betrayed our trust. The dim bulbs hanging from the ceiling cast long shadows, making the room seem like a stage set for a grim play. Kaido's voice boomed off the concrete walls, his face a mask of barely contained anger. You led them straight to us, Felix. We could have been captured, or worse. Felix stood there, a lone figure against the judgment of the group, his uniform a stark reminder of the line he had crossed. I know, he replied, his voice barely above a murmur. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. Mina paced back and forth, her usually composed demeanor replaced by agitation. Intentions don't change outcomes. We're in more danger now because of you. The room was thick with tension, the air so heavy it was hard to breathe. We were at a crossroads, the desire for retribution afire in our bellies, yet our spiritual principles, the very foundation of our cause, held us back from the edge. It was Ashoka, her presence a calming force, who broke the silence. What you did was wrong, Felix. But how we respond to your actions will define us just as much as it defines you. Her words hung in the air, a challenge to our anger and hurt. She moved closer to Felix, looking into his eyes. Tell me, Felix, do you understand the pain you've caused? Felix nodded, his head bowed, his hands clenched at his sides. I do. I was a fool, blinded by duty to a system that I now see as broken. I am sorry, truly. Kaido snorted, the sound sharp in the still room. Sorry doesn't fix this mess. Ashoka turned to face the rest of us, her eyes searching our faces. We must decide what to do with Felix. But let us remember the teachings of compassion. They are easy to follow when the path is smooth, but the true test comes when it's strewn with thorns. The debate that followed was long and fraught with emotion. Some argued for harsh consequences, while others spoke of second chances and redemption. Through it all, Ashoka's lessons on compassion echoed in our hearts. In the end, it was the memory of our shared humanity that led us to our decision. We will not act in vengeance, Ashoka declared. Felix will have the chance to make amends, to prove his remorse through actions, not just words. Felix's eyes lifted, a glimmer of hope breaking through the remorse that clouded them. I will do whatever it takes to right my wrongs, he vowed. The moment of intense reckoning had led us to forgiveness and the reformation of the traitor. It was a decision that would not be easy for any of us to live with, but it was one that aligned with our deepest values. As we dispersed, leaving Felix to reflect on the gravity of his betrayal and the gift of forgiveness, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Ashoka's teachings on compassion had been put to the test, and we had emerged with our integrity intact. The price of betrayal was high, but the cost of losing ourselves to anger and retribution would have been much higher. We were more than the sum of our fears and our desire for payback. We were a coalition built on the ideals of freedom and enlightenment. And as we continued on our journey, those ideals would light the way forward, guiding us through the darkest of tunnels toward the dawn that awaited us on the other side. Chapter 12, Tenuous Negotiations. "Let's talk," Maximus finally said, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. Kaido stepped forward, his stature rivaling that of Maximus. "What do you want?" Kaido's voice was firm, betraying none of the uncertainty we all felt. Maximus stopped pacing and turned to face us, his steel-blue eyes scanning the group. "I want information. The location of your allies outside the city." Mina, quick-witted and braver than most of us, chimed in. "And what do we get in return?" "Empty promises?" A smirk played on Maximus's lips. "Safe passage. A head start before I come after you again." The offer hung in the air, a bitter fruit that none of us wanted to pluck. Yet the will to survive was strong, battling the fear of capitulation that gnawed at our resolve. Ashoka, her voice the embodiment of calm, stepped beside Kaido. "Your hunt for us, it's personal, isn't it?" she asked, her eyes locked onto Maximus's. There was a pause, a moment where something flickered behind Maximus's gaze, a ghost of something more than the enforcer we knew. "You could say that," he muttered, almost to himself. "In a risky play," Ashoka continued. "You were once like us, weren't you? Fighting against the machine?" Maximus's posture stiffened, his next words laced with a bitterness that went beyond his role as an enforcer. "That was a long time ago. Things change." The revelation about Maximus's past seemed to align with our own struggle, a mirror reflecting a shared history of oppression and the fight for freedom. Kaido, seizing the moment, offered a proposal. "We'll give you a name, a minor player. In exchange, you give us a full day's lead, no pursuit." Maximus considered the offer, his jaw set. After a long silence, he nodded curtly. "Agreed. But if you're lying..." "We're not," Ashoka interjected. "We value our word, even to those who've lost their way." As the exchange was made, a name for a promise, there was an unexpected twist. Maximus, perhaps moved by a lingering connection to his former self, added, "There's an old service tunnel, 2 miles north. It's off the grid. Take it." The group exchanged surprised glances. This was more than we had hoped for, a sliver of unexpected aid from the very person hunting us. As we made our way to the service tunnel, the fear of betrayal still whispered in the shadows, but the chance for escape was too precious to ignore. Maximus's departure was silent, his back a retreating shadow that seemed to carry the burden of his choices. In the quiet that followed, the group's spirits were cautiously lifted. We had negotiated with the enforcer, struck a delicate balance between survival and surrender, and emerged with a new path forward. The truth about Maximus's past had cast him in a different light, and for a fleeting moment, the lines between us blurred. We were all pawns in a larger game, seeking release from the grip of the machine that held us. Now, with each step through the service tunnel, our firmness strengthened. We were not just fleeing. We were moving towards something greater, a future where the Lotus could awaken fully, and the machine's hold on our spirits would be broken forever. Chapter 13, Clash of Ideals. The crackling energy in the air was the first sign that the old system wouldn't let us go without a fight. As I stood beside Ashoka, the rumble of approaching drones sent a clear message. The last vestiges of rebellion were under siege. "This is it," I said, peering at the swarm of high-tech adversaries descending upon our makeshift barricade. The metallic scent of ionized air filled the abandoned factory we had claimed as our final stand. Kaido, his fists clenched, stepped up beside me, his gaze locked on the advancing front. "They want to snuff out hope, but we won't let them." Ashoka, her posture serene amidst the growing chaos, turned to face our small band of resolute rebels. "Remember why we're here," she called out, her voice cutting through the chatter. "Freedom is not just a place or a condition, it's a choice, a state of being." Mina, her fingers dancing across the interface of a jury-rigged console, nodded in agreement. "They think they can crush us with fear, but we've already chosen to be free, no matter what comes at us. The drones bore down on us, their sleek bodies a sharp division to the rusted beams and crumbling concrete of our surroundings. The whir of their engines was a chilling symphony, the soundtrack of a system determined to maintain control. Positions. Kaido barked, and we scattered. He took point, his body a shield as much as a weapon. Mina ducked behind a control panel, her hands a blur as she worked to counter the incoming threat. Hiro, his face set in a grimace, manned a cobbled-together turret, the staccato of its fire punctuating the air. I found myself beside Ashoka, her calm a fortress against the encroaching destruction. "They'll be on us any minute," I said, the weight of the moment heavy on my shoulders. Ashoka placed a hand on my arm, her touch grounding. "Whatever happens, Siddhartha, know that you have already awakened the Lotus within. You've seen beyond the machine. No one can take that from you." Her words were a lantern, shining through the fog of impending conflict. I nodded, my fortitude hardening like steel tempered in fire. We were not just fighting for our lives. We were fighting for the very soul of humanity. The battle that ensued was a tempest of light and sound. Drones swooped and fired, their energy weapons leaving scorch marks on the walls. Kaido roared challenges at the machines, his defiance a rallying cry. Mina's countermeasures sizzled through the air, disrupting the drones' flight patterns. Hiro's turret chugged on, a relentless hammer against the anvil of our foes. Throughout it all, Ashoka remained the eye of the storm, her presence a reminder of the wisdom that had brought us to this point. Her words of peace and freedom wove through the din of battle, keeping us centered, keeping us human. As the onslaught intensified, the question of what freedom was worth came to a head. Each blast from the enemy, each near miss, tested our strength and solidarity. But we held fast, our unity an unbreakable chain. In the lulls between waves, we caught our breath, checking on one another with nods and tight smiles. The truth that Ashoka had instilled in us, that our ideals were worth fighting for, kept our spirits buoyant amidst the chaos. The coalition, battered but unbroken, stood strong. We were the embodiment of the dystopic escape archetype, the rebels who dared to dream of a world unshackled by oppression. The clash of ideals was not just our battle, it was a symbol of hope for all those who yearned to breathe free. And as the dust settled and the last drone fell silent, we knew that this was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter. The price of our struggle was high, but the value of our freedom was immeasurable. We stood together, a record to the power of the human spirit, ready to face whatever came next. For we were awake, and the lotus within us was blooming in defiance of the machine. Chapter 14, The Martyr's Gift. The stale air of the underground passage clung to my lungs as we pressed forward, our footsteps a synchronized rhythm against the cold, damp earth. We had been moving for hours, the weight of our mission a silent shadow that matched our pace. Kaido's usually booming voice was a hushed growl, his large frame a protective barrier leading our group. We're close now. Just a bit further to the surface. Mina, with her keen eyes that missed nothing, scanned our surroundings. We can't let our guard down, not when we're this close. The passage began to narrow, the walls pressing in with an intensity that felt deliberate, as if the city itself was trying to crush our spirits before we could taste the sweetness of freedom. It was then that the distant sounds of pursuit reached our ears. The whirring of machines, the unmistakable hum of drones coming to life, the system awakening to our presence. "We need a plan," I stated, my voice steady despite the ripples of anxiety that threatened to break through my resolve. Ashoka, her wisdom a constant undercurrent, met my gaze. Sometimes, the path of least resistance is not the most direct one. The truth of her words settled over us, a heavy cloak with the power to smother or shield. It was Hiro, the quietest among us, who stepped forward, his face set in a determined line. "I'll lead them away," he said, a simple statement that hung in the air, fraught with unspoken finality. Kaido's hand shot out, gripping Hiro's arm. "No, we can't let you do that. There's got to be another way." Hiro shook his head, a sad smile playing on his lips. "It's the only way. You all have to make it out. I can live with that." Mina's hands clenched into fists, her devices momentarily forgotten. "But at what cost? You're one of us, Hiro." His smile didn't waver as he looked at each of us in turn. "And that's why I have to do this. For all of us." for the future. Without another word, Hero turned and dashed back the way we came, his footsteps echoing like the beat of a sacrificial drum. We were left in stunned silence, the gravity of his decision anchoring us to the spot. Ashoka's voice, usually so calm, trembled with emotion. Let his gift not be in vain. Move. We surged forward, driven by the urgency of Hero's diversion. The pursuit sounds faded in one direction as we pressed on in another, our escape route suddenly clear. As we emerged into the dim twilight of dawn, the first breath of free air filled my lungs with a bittersweet tang. Freedom had never felt so heavy, the price paid etched into the very essence of its taste. The loss of Hero was a wound fresh and raw, a pain that carved out a hollow space within me. It was in this moment that my understanding of impermanence, a concept so often discussed in the abstract, crystallized into a sharp personal loss. Kaido's voice, once a thunderous force, was now a whisper of its former self. He was the bravest of us all. Mina nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. His memory will guide us, even in the darkest times. We stood there, a band of survivors on the threshold of a world we had only dreamed of, the dawnlight painting our faces with the colors of hope and mourning. Hero's sacrifice, his martyr's gift, had ensured our escape, but it had also imparted a lesson more profound than any victory. In our final struggle, we had learned the true cost of freedom, and it was a knowledge that would forever shape the path ahead. As we turned away from the city, its towering structures a silhouette against the awakening sky, I knew we would carry Hero's spirit with us. His choice had been his final testament, a declaration of belief in a cause greater than any one life. And in his honor, we would continue the fight, for in the end, it was not just about escaping the machine, it was about awakening the Lotus within. Chapter 15, The Dawn of Deliverance. Mina halted in her tracks, gazing up at the sprawling expanse above. "Would you look at that?" she marveled. "The sky. It's so vast." Kaido, usually a man of action over words, stood beside her, his eyes reflecting the dawn. "Never thought we'd see the sun rise on the other side," he muttered, a hint of awe in his gruff tone. I stepped forward, the uneven ground beneath my feet a reminder of the natural world's imperfect beauty. "It's more than I imagined," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. Ashoka joined us, her eyes scanning the horizon with quiet satisfaction. "This is just the beginning," she said. "The path to enlightenment stretches before us, unmarked by the footprints of machines." The remnants of the city were now just a silhouette against the lightening sky, a shadow of the life we had left behind. Yet, the ghosts of our past lingered, the memories of those we lost, the echoes of battles fought, challenging the hope stirring in our chests. "Can we really start anew?" I asked, turning to Ashoka. After all that's happened, her gaze met mine, as steady and calming as the earth itself. "Liberation is not a destination, Sid. It's a journey that begins within." The group wandered forward, our feet crunching on the frost-kissed grass. We were explorers discovering a land unmarred by the digital chains that had once bound us. Birds chirped in the distance, a symphony of life that had been absent from the artificial soundscape of the city. Mina picked up a fallen leaf, its edges tinged with the first hints of autumn. "Nature has its own language," she observed, tracing the veins of the leaf with a finger, one that doesn't need wires or codes to be understood. Kaido laughed, the sound rich and full. "Guess we've got a lot to learn then." As the sun climbed higher, its warmth seeping into our bones, I felt a shift within me. The realization dawned that liberation was not just the act of escaping the city's confines, but the shedding of a mindset that had kept us in invisible shackles. We set up a temporary camp near a babbling brook, its waters clear and quick. The simple act of gathering wood for a fire, the smell of earth as we sat on the ground, felt like acts of rebellion, of reclamation of our humanity. Ashoka led us in a moment of reflection, her words a guide to look inward. "Freedom is the natural state of our spirit. Remember this feeling, this connection to the world and to each other." The dialogue between us flowed, natural and unforced, a sharing of dreams and fears, of plans for the days to come. We were no longer just fugitives on the run. We were pioneers on the threshold of a new existence. "The dawn of deliverance," I mused aloud, gazing at the light playing across the brook. "It's not just the end of our flight, it's the start of truly living." The group nodded in agreement, each of us carrying the weight of our past, but also the lightness of our newfound freedom. The journey ahead would not be without its challenges, but we faced it together, united by a bond forged in the depths of struggle and now strengthened in the light of liberation. As it all of our escape closed, a new chapter beckoned, one where the lotus within each of us could unfold its petals to the nurturing rays of the sun, away from the shadow of the machine. Chapter 16, Rebirth in the Wilderness. Standing at the center of our burgeoning community, I watched as Kaido and Mina debated the layout of our first true structure, a communal hall that would serve as the heart of our new way of life. It needs to be open, welcoming, Mina insisted, gesturing with her hands to mimic the walls expanding outward, a place where ideas can flow as freely as the river. Kaido scratched his beard, considering her words. That's all well and good, but it also has to be practical. We need sturdy walls to shield us from the elements. Their back and forth was a melody of progress, the harmony of differing perspectives shaping the future before our eyes. The challenges of creating a new way of life were many, as old habits and thoughts from our past lives in Neo-Tokyo resurfaced like specters of a bygone era. Ashoka approached, her smile like the serene surface of a still pond. Building anew is not just about structures and rules. It's about cultivating the spirit of Dharma and interconnectedness within each of us, she said, her voice a soft chime in the morning air. I nodded, her wisdom resonating within me. We've been given a second chance, a chance to live by the values we hold dear, not by the decrees of a machine. As the day unfolded, the sounds of construction and laughter intermingled, a symphony of human endeavor. Our small community, once just a dream, was taking shape, each nail and beam a corroboration to our collective will. By the fire that evening, as the stars began to dot the sky like distant lanterns, I shared my thoughts with the group. We're more than survivors. We're pioneers, visionaries who've seen the darkness and chosen to create light. Mina tossed a twig into the flames, watching it catch. We've all lost something along the way, but look at what we're gaining. This, she gestured to the circle of faces illuminated by the fire, is family. Kaido grunted in agreement, his eyes reflecting the dance of the flames. We're laying the foundation for something bigger than any one of us, for future generations to thrive. The establishment of our new community, rooted in Dharma and interconnectedness, was a delicate dance between the past and the potential of the future. We each played our part, contributing to a society where technology served us, not the other way around. As the fire dwindled to embers, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This was rebirth in the wilderness, a chance to live authentically, to be stewards of the land and guardians of our newfound freedom. In the quiet of the night, Ashoka's voice found me once more. You have embraced your role as a leader, Sid, a beamer of hope for all who will come after us. I looked into the fire, the embers a mirror of the spark I felt within. I'm just one part of this, I replied. We're all leaders here, each with a role to play in guiding our community forward. And so, under the watchful gaze of the stars, we fell into a contented silence, each of us dreaming of the days ahead. We had escaped the weighty grip of the machine, and in its place, we were building a society where the human spirit could soar, unencumbered by the shadows of control. As dawn approached, heralding the start of a new day, I knew that our journey was far from over, but for the first time, I felt truly free, not just from the physical chains of a dystopian world, but from the mental fetters that had bound my thoughts. We were awake, truly awake, and the lotus within each of us was blooming, a symbol of rebirth in the wilderness. Our shared story comes to a close. We thank you for experiencing awakening the lotus in the machine alongside us. Let StoryWave.ai continue to weave stories from your imagination by supporting us with a like, share, and subscription. Join us for more narrative voyages daily. March 2024. Till we meet again.